to a glorious new edition of Revelationary, a podcast from modern times, with yours truly, Reverend Ronald B. Fagee, of the Christ Church of the Apocalyptic Assemblies. In Acts chapter 9, when the Apostle Paul was on the road to Damascus, while he was still under the name of Saul, God struck him and his companions with a blinding light, and Jesus spoke directly to him with a voice that none of his other companions heard, calling Paul directly into the ministry. And dear hearts, just like Paul, I too had a similar event take place early in my ministry. Now Paul the apostle, who is responsible for most of our New Testament books, was a vile murderer, a torturer, and a persecutor of Christians before he received his transformational calling into the ministry. That, my friends, is where Paul and I differ, because the only sin I had ever been guilty of prior to my conversion was swatting ungodly flies at the buffet, trying to land on my chicken. But it was there at the Crystal River Diner buffet that the Lord struck me with a blinding light as I went to refill my third plate. The blinding light of new heat lamps that I had never noticed before until I dug deep into that buffet for a fresh helping of one of my absolute favorite country beans and ham hocks. Dear hearts, I could not refuse the intoxicating aroma of those beans. My mouth was watering so much, I looked like a St. Bernard in heat begging at the dinner table. Drool was hanging inches off my lips, and I could not wait until I got back to my table before I had a taste of that delicious food. I took a piece of cornbread and sopped up a big heaping scoop of those beans on top of it and just about inhaled it. But in the process, I was not aware that in those beans was a small ham hock that got lodged in the back of my throat. I started choking so hard my face turned as red as a devil's birthday suit. And the next thing I know, I was floating at the top of the ceiling, watching all the commotion and seeing my plump carcass below. It's the lightest I've ever felt in my life. And just then, dear hearts, in the blink of an eye, I went from floating on that ceiling to standing smack dab in the middle of a long line of those who passed on awaiting judgment in front of St. Peter at the pearly gates. And he said, "Reverend Fagee, why art thou standing there in line? Comest thou forth into the throne room of the Father, for he hath expecteth thee." Right then, those pearly gates swung open wide to reveal the most beautiful city mine eyes could ever behold. A place no televangelist would ever want to leave. Streets of pure 24-karat gold. Walls of jasper, street lights made of diamonds, and precious gemstones that glowed sapphire red, emerald green, and golden yellow. The closest I have ever seen such a sight was watching a Praise the Lord telethon on TBN. And dear hearts, there were so many mansions on every street corner, mansions so big and with so many rooms. They make Pastor Kenny Copeland's house look like a shack. And as I stood, captivated by its beauty, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see the Good Shepherd Jesus standing there with a warm smile. And he said, "Reverend, welcome to glory. My Father has been waiting half an eternity to meet you." Then he pointed to his Rolex watch and said, "Time is of the essence." And I said, "Lord, lead the way, and I will follow you." And dear hearts, he led me directly into the throne room of God. Immediately, in a booming voice, I heard, "Reverend Fagee, I am your biggest fan. Come forth and heareth my word, for I shall tell thee of the glorious prosperity gospel ministry, of which I have called thee to. And I said, the ministry, Lord, but I haven't read most of the books of the Bible yet. And he said, have no fear, my child. Most of my followers have yet to read them all also. But I have called you according to mine purpose. And that, dear hearts, is when God shared with me the miracle of the $1,000 faith seed plan. It must have seemed like half an eternity while we talked. And then, in the blink of an eye, God told me it was time to go back and start the harvest. But before he sent me back, he had just one request. He asked me, he said, Reverend, you are my favorite author aside from Paul. Will you do me the honor of signing my copy of your personal book, The End of the Universe, a Newer Testament? I said, but Lord, I know not of what book you speak. I haven't written any books. And he told me, time bindeth me not. I am the God of the past, present, and future, and it is your future from whence it came. And I said, Lord, do you have a Sharpie? And in exchange of me signing God's personal copy, he gave me his personal cell phone number so that I could always be in direct communication with the Father and get his instructions as needed. Then Jesus led me back to the pearly gates, and on the way, I happened to look over and see the angels preparing the marriage supper of the Lord, a banquet table so full and bountiful of every mouth-watering food you could imagine, hash brown casseroles, heavenly ham, chili cornbread salad, and angel eggs. I said, Lord, do I really have to go now? And he nodded yes and told me, but worry not. The time is short, and you will soon take your place at the table. And I said, Lord, when the roll is called up yonder, I want to be there at the dinner table with a hot buttered roll. And blessed be, my friends, he did let me sneak a taste test. A glorious chicken leg, and it was the crispiest, most tender chicken my lips have ever tasted. Second only, of course, to my wife Bambi's. And after that last bite, I went from standing at the pearly gates to being right back in my earthly body, as if no time had passed. My wife Bambi was standing right behind me, performing the hind lick maneuver. And that's when the ham hock flew out of my mouth across the room, and breath once again filled my old tired body. And that, dear hearts, is the blessed story of how God personally gave me my calling at the buffet. And if you'd like to hear more details of my story, you can log on to FageeMinistries.com and buy my newest book, Ham Hock to Glory, My Near-Death Experience at the Buffet. And my friends, right now is the time to start your financial harvest. Start planting your seeds of faith today and dig deep into the fertile ground of blessings by logging on to FageeMinistries.com and donate just $1,000. Just $1,000 will start the crop of plenty. And be sure to stock up on our end-time survival food, because, as Jesus said, the time is short. And speaking of short on time, that's all the time that we have this week. God bless you, dear hearts, and we look forward to seeing you all right back here on the next edition of Revelationary. And until then, we look forward to your loving donations.
This has been a message of the Reverend Ron Fagee.